here are the top 10 web application vulnerabilities that we see out there. So if you look at this list, this is the list from 2021, you can see that we've had a pretty solid hit of 7 out of 10 of these vulnerabilities exploited. To start with broken access control, we saw a great example of that during the lesson where we made fraudulent posts. Anytime that you can make a post on behalf of another user, that's a pretty clear indication that you've got a problem with access control. Cryptographic failures, typically they deal with the lack of use with HTTPS, and that's exactly what we saw here. Because our site was not running HTTPS, we weren't able to put in place certain things like the set secure or the HTTP only option inside cookies. Both of those would have prevented cookies from being sent over a connection that was not secured with HTTPS, or it would have prevented script running in the browser from accessing our cookies. And every time we stole cookies, looked at the content of cookies, and so forth, that's a representation of some cryptographic failures, because we could have prevented that if we'd had the proper controls in place. Number 3, injection. We saw that all over the place. Not only was it reflected cross-site scripting injections, but we saw persisted cross-site scripting injections, DOM-based injection attacks. We saw command injection attacks, so we really covered the spectrum when it comes to injection. Now that's a pretty broad category, but I think we hit that pretty hard. Insecure design, that's a very broad and far-reaching vulnerability, but we saw all sorts of different indications of insecure design at play. One of the ones that really jumps out and should come to your mind right away is the example that we saw with the cross-site request forgery. That entire process of resetting the admin password should have been protected with a token, and the design was flawed simply because it did not verify the original password before it asked you for the new set of passwords. So a pretty deep design flaw there. We exploited that pretty heavily during the course. Security misconfiguration, that one, you could take a look at our file inclusion example as a good example of security misconfiguration. Apache was installed in the default location. That gave us an advantage when it came to crafting our path statement that we used for the file inclusion. That's where we grabbed the password file. Now, if you're just installing Apache as a way of achieving security through obscurity and installing that in a different location, that's probably not a good thing. But if it's part of a coordinated effort where you're intentionally saying, we're going to move this installation of this vulnerable application, Apache, out of its normal default install path as a documented step in hardening our servers in order to place a level of adversarial obstruction, well then, that's a conscious configuration decision that you're making, and by not making those decisions, you're really misconfiguring. So that's how we attack number 5. Identification, authentication failures, we saw that when we were stealing cookies, we saw that when we were posing other users, we saw that when we attacked the knowledge-based authentication, that secret question and answer scenario that you see so many times. So we beat number 7 up pretty good as well. Number 8, software and data integrity failures. Anytime that we were able to trick the system into losing integrity, you saw a data integrity failure. Example of that, all the different times that we repurposed forms, all of the different times that we were able to manipulate that data and create the illusion back to the user that we wanted. That was data integrity failure within the application. So you've got 7 out of 10 hit with the OWASP top 10. If you look at how you could prevent these, it will start to point you in the right direction in terms of the controls that you need to have in place in order to stop many of the attacks that we saw throughout this course. So let's dig a little bit deeper into a couple of these, and that should put us in a pretty good spot, not only on the offensive side, but also a taste of the defensive side as well, so that you can start to point your clients in the right